Future Warrior, Earth's Children. Chapter 6. The warehouse looked like any other, just one of hundreds in the sprawling, run-down complex that made up the industrial estate. In decades gone past, the buildings would have been used by companies, both big and small, as transport and storage hubs for the region, or as metal fabrication and heavy manufacturing facilities. With the advent of interstellar transport and new composite materials and manufacturing processes, many of those traditional blue-collar businesses had hit hard times and disappeared. This showed in the buildings that remained. Many were clearly run down, old paint flaking, exposed metal rusting, and weeds growing between paving stones where once heavy machinery would have been busily moving materials. The few businesses that remained were living on the decay, focusing on recycling the remnants of the past, while many of the spacious warehouses had been converted into low-rent storage, credits for space, no questions asked. As he looked down on the darkened estate, none of this interested Pierce. He had spent his career in the service of the intelligence branch, had given everything, even his wife's life, to the service. All he was interested in now was his mission and justice. It was more vengeance than justice, he knew. The man he hunted was not just another name. He was responsible for the loss of many lives, including the one Pierce had loved the most. Lazarus, that was what he liked to call himself. The name annoyed Pierce. He knew his target's real name, Atlas Heerden, and he knew what very few did, that he was the natural-born son of the head of the intelligence branch, General Jacob de Veers. Before his treason, Atlas had been one of the service's most gifted operatives, a star on the rise. Now he was officially dead, a victim of Lazarus, his name honored even though he was one and the same. Pierce looked up at the clear sky. Stars were spread out overhead, peeking their bright faces though patchy wisps of thin cloud. Was today the day? Was today the day it would end? Pierce did not know. His target was the hardest he had ever tracked. Many had been lost in the hunt, and many sure leads had led to nothing more than hollow disappointment. Not for the first time, Pierce wondered why he had been chosen to bear this burden. Surely there must have been others, people who were not emotionally involved and had the same skills. Was it the sense of loss that he knew he shared with de Veers? Had de Veers seen something in him that gave him the confidence to share the deepest of secrets? Or was it the certain knowledge that, like de Veers himself, Pierce would never stop, never tire, until Atlas was truly dead, this time not to rise again? Or was it because, even with what he now knew, the secrets within the lies obscured by misdirection, his belief in the importance of the service was unshakable? Pierce glanced back to where his assembled team waited, quiet and alert. They were good men and women, as hard and sharp as tempered steel. They knew the danger of their quarry, but had no fear. They followed orders unquestioningly and were prepared to put it all on the line to achieve the mission. They were the knife that was slowly but surely cutting out the corrupted flesh from the inside. Pierce took a deep breath and then watched as on the exhale it was turned to mist by the cool night air. Unconsciously, he reached a hand down and checked that his P240S was still hanging from its strap. The texture of the stubby silencer fitted to the standard P240 10mm submachine gun, feeling rough on his fingers. He wore no heavy armor tonight, just close-fitting law enforcement issue body armor that fit concealed under his leather jacket. On his head, however, despite the darkness, he wore intelligence branch issue sunglasses. The outwardly fashionable-looking sunglasses were packed with sensitive electronics, including explosive threat detection and vision-enhancing software and sensors. Behind him, his team were wearing a mix of civilian and tactical clothing and using a vast assortment of weapons and equipment. Pierce had given his people free range to equip themselves with whatever they felt they needed and were most comfortable with. Most like him carried the P240S for this mission, while a couple carried silenced carbines and rifles firing more powerful rounds equipped with various scopes and tactical sights. Pierce glanced up at the dark sky before focusing in on the target building. It was early in the morning now, the time when wits and reactions were at their slowest, when the body's circadian rhythm was at its lowest ebb. Signals, intercepts, and long hard work had brought them to this location Pierce knew. The Red Legion, such as remained on Earth, had gone deep underground and knew that it was hunted each and every hour of every day. Micro-burst transmissions intercepted by intelligence branch listening stations and then painstakingly decrypted had identified the warehouse as a Red Legion safe house, and more importantly that Lazarus was using it. As soon as word came of a possible Lazarus location, Pierce had retasked surveillance assets and deployed with his Go team. The operation had been stood up with little notice and time to verify the intelligence or conduct detailed surveillance. But time was critical. Atlas Heerden knew better than anyone the resources and determination behind the hunt for him, and he never stayed anywhere for long. Pierce swept his gaze over the building. All seemed normal. It looked no different from any of the dozens of warehouses surrounding it. There was no overt security, no foot patrols or detectable sensors, but preliminary analysis of satellite imagery records had shown people intermittently coming and going. This in itself was not definitive, but coupled with the signal's intercepts and the fact that the rental of the warehouse had been done using anonymous means meant that the evidence was conclusive enough for Pierce. They would go in hard. Leaving 2 team members to cover them with silenced sniper rifle from the rooftop, Pierce led the others down to move in closer. Pierce led the way, his P-240S at his shoulder in the ready position. There had been no time to carefully rehearse the mission, so they went straight and weapons-free. Persistent overhead aerial surveillance was provided by a pair of UAVs, while further out a backup tactical team equipped with heavy weaponry stood, ready to move in if required. As he moved, Pierce controlled his breathing to slow his heartbeat, and a familiar calm came over him. The time for questions and doubts had passed. Whatever happened now was out of his hands. With the quiet crunching of gravel under boots, Pierce reached the wall of the target warehouse and paused for a moment as his team formed up behind him. The chosen point of entry was a small single-person access door set to the side of one of the main roller doors. Imagery confirmed that of the 3 access doors, this was the one that was used by people coming and going. This meant it was the least likely to be booby-trapped. Pierce could see the door and move towards it, keeping in the shadows cast by the warehouse. With a clank, the door abruptly swung open and a man stepped out. Pierce dropped to one knee, raised one hand to signal halt, and froze in the shadows, his P-240S sighted on the man's head. The man seemed unaware of them and stood for a moment in the cold night air, his breath misting. He closed the door and turned towards Pierce, a weapon clearly visible, partially concealed under his open coat. Pierce had begun to squeeze his trigger when the man's head suddenly snapped around, and he collapsed wordlessly, a fine pink mist spraying onto the faded white walls of the warehouse. Tango down, horizon clear. Pierce eased off his trigger, confirmed tango down, good shooting over watch, moving. Pierce paused by the door, examining it closely. Nearby from the body on the ground, there was a faint gurgling sound as air was released from lungs as muscles relaxed in death. The door showed no outward signs of being trapped in some manner, and no traces of explosives were detected by the scanning routines in Pierce's eyewear. The door was, however, fitted with a newer biometric locking system that combined a coded touchpad with a biometric sequencer that analyzed the user's DNA as the code was entered. The lock was far too advanced for the warehouse and looked newly installed. With a word, Pierce signaled to the Go team's explosives expert, who moved and gave the door a quick examination, deciding against a more thorough scan, as this could set off any intrusion sensors. The specialist decided for the straightforward approach. Using a pressure pack of thermofoam, he sprayed around the perimeter of the door's frame, and then using the triggering key activated it by sending a coded electrical charge through the foamy compound. Soundlessly, the thermofoam reached a temperature of several thousand degrees at the points of contact. Like a glowing halo, the door was melted out of its frame, and with a heave, the specialist dragged it clear, leaving a glowing hole into the interior of the warehouse, the whole process only lasting seconds. Pierce was the first through, his P-240S leading the way. The interior of the warehouse was well lit and filled with rows of heavy storage shelves that reached to the ceiling. As the rest of the team deployed in after him, Pierce caught a glimpse of movement and swung his P-240S towards it. From between one of the rows of shelving, a teenage boy emerged wearing dirty overalls, his eyes widening in surprise. The boy froze, a mixture of confusion and fear wearing across his face. It was then Pierce noticed the weapon hanging loosely from a strap at his side. The boy at the same moment seemed to remember it himself and fumbled to raise it, still having forgotten to call out and raise the alarm. Pierce shot him in the heart with a double tap, the boy crumpling to the ground with a muffled gurgle. Pierce and his team fanned out and pushed into the warehouse. As they moved, the first real resistance was encountered as a shout rang out, followed by a burst of weapons fire, the noise shockingly loud in the quiet warehouse. The rounds went wide and thumped into cargo containers stacked on the shelves. With smooth efficiency, members of the Go team slid into cover and returned fire with their silenced weapons. Pierce knew that this was the crucial moment. If they lost the initiative, now their quarry or possible valuable evidence could be lost. They had to keep the momentum. All units go loud. Push, push, push. As one, they rose, and splitting into three-person teams advanced, one group covering the others with a withering hail of fire. The fight was instinctive and brutally fast, exactly the type which favored the highly trained strike team. As he swept forward, Pierce saw more armed hostiles emerging from the far end of the warehouse, and without breaking stride, cut them down with controlled bursts. The fight was intense but short, and moments later all resistance had been crushed. Clear. All clear. At a glance, Pierce counted 8 dead, 9 counting the sentry who had been eliminated outside. There were no survivors. Pierce quickly checked each face. Atlas wasn't there. The dead wore a motley collection of civilian clothing and had possessed an equally diverse collection of weapons, from military-grade assault rifles to repurposed civilian hunting weapons. With the building cleared and no sign of Atlas, Pierce turned instead to looking for usable intelligence. The safe house quickly turned up Red Legion paraphernalia and propaganda material, as well as a sizable stock of basic supplies. There were also various computers and data storage devices that would be handed over the technical intelligence team for analysis. "Sir, here." Pierce swore under his breath and ran to the sound of the voice across the warehouse. Placed in an isolated corner of the building was a small habitation unit. Even as he approached it, Pierce could smell the blood. The inside of the small room was a mess of blood and scattered instruments, while at one end a body lay on a bench. Pierce took it in carefully, assessing every detail. The instruments and the bench the body lay upon were medical in origin, probably surplus from an old surgery. The blood was clotted and dark cold, but still smelt fresh, not more than a few days old. Likewise, the body had not yet begun to bloat. Closer examination revealed it to be that of man, although the ago was impossible to determine. Whoever it was has been systematically tortured over a period of time, with fingers, toes, eyes, face, and genitalia all showing significant mutilation. The room also contained discarded dispensers for blood plasma and stimulants. They had wanted the victim kept alive for as long as possible, needed to learn something important. "Give me a DNA profile. I want to know who this is. Do it now." Pierce stepped outside and glanced up at the ceiling and walls of the warehouse. They were covered with thick insulation. Clearly, the building had once been used for storing refrigerated goods, perfect for ensuring privacy. Walking through the warehouse, Pierce opened a ComNet link. "Site is secure. Negative contact with primary target. But he was here. Do you have definitive proof he used the site?" Pierce frowned. "No, just my instinct. We also found a dead captive. No ID yet. Looks like he interrogated. Keep me updated on your progress." The link went dead, and Pierce stopped and knelt down at the body of the boy he had killed upon entry. The boy's body was rapidly cooling, his bright eyes slowly turning glassy. Pierce guessed he could not have been more than 16, only a child in the wrong place at the wrong time, fighting for the wrong cause. Pierce wondered if the boy's parents knew where he was, what he was involved in. If not, they soon would. Pierce stood and through habit grasped the small pendant that hung by a chain around his neck, a ring, gently stroking as he thought. Another dead end, but the trail would not end. This site would contain information that would lead to others, and the hunt would continue. "That shit will rot your brain." Link and Stalker turned to look at the scowling face of Lee Waters. Link responding first. "It's the Newsnet." "I know it. the statement stands. Stalker smiled as Waters stomped out of the mess hall. It felt good to have a deck under him again and be back in orbit. The fighting on Sci-Fi was all but over. The Deimos forces shattered to the point that the fleet had allowed the attached civilian media contingent down to report on the mopping-up operations. The news net showed the ruins of Janax, with reports about the size of the victory and the light causalities that had been sustained during the fighting. Stalker sighed. Waters was right. It was bullshit. Leaving Link and the others in the crowded mess hall, Stalker decided to make his way up to the bridge. A few minutes later, Stalker stepped out onto the bridge of the Meteor-class transport ship HSTS 1803, meaning Heavy Space Transport Ship number 1803. The bridge was quite modest compared to others he had seen, his memory flashing back to that of the Pantheon-class cruiser UES Artemis. It seemed like a lifetime had passed since he had stood on the bridge and spoken to Captain Sandra Jansen. The Artemis was no more, destroyed at Ross 154 along with too many others. For what he had heard, Captain Jansen had survived her ship's loss and now commanded another Pantheon-class cruiser, the UES Athena. He wondered where she and the Athena were now. The thought passed as Stalker moved into the communications room and checked the latest intelligence reports. The media was right about one thing. The fight for Sci-Fi was over. The Deimos fleet had ceded control of the space around Sci-Fi following the landings, and despite the UEF probing on all fronts, the war in space seemed to be at a low ebb. The situation wouldn't last. With Sci-Fi almost secured, soon the combined forces of the UEDF would turn their attention to its next objective. Stalker frowned as he viewed the tangled maze of intelligence reports. He was glad it would not fall to him to decide where that objective lay. Commodore Sandra Jansen was not a woman that many would call beautiful. In her 40s, she had hawkish features, raven hair, and a serious countenance. She had never made a habit of smiling, and retained a semi-permanent stern expression and a penetrating stare that all her bridge officers knew well. Right now, her stare was fixed on her tactical officer as he assessed the latest results sent back from the deployed probes. "Ma'am, we are still showing 3 ships in orbit, 1 cruiser-class and 2 destroyer-class vessels. The latest convoy has taken on provisions and departed. How many fighter patrols are there?" "We are tracking 6 groups, ma'am. The same sweep patterns as before, patrolling out to 1,000 kilometers. There may be closer in patrols, but we can't get a fix at this range." For the past week, the routine had been the same number of fighter patrols and the same number of ships guarding the facility. It seemed that the enemy had grown complacent, confident that in this out-of-the-way location far from the fighting they would escape notice. Sandra Jansen gave a small, wolfish grin, the gesture going unnoticed by those around her. They would pay for their lack of foresight. The UES Athena had been deep behind enemy lines in occupied space for over 2 months. In that time, she had fought several skirmishes, shattered a lightly protected supply convoy, and now she had discovered a true prize, an enemy resupply depot. The depot was located on a large asteroid that had a stable orbit, perfect for establishing a replenishment point for ships transiting to and from the front lines. Since coming into the system and detecting unusual activity, the Athena had been loitering amongst an asteroid field running on minimal systems. The depot was too well protected for her to destroy on her own, so instead she had settled in to wait and watch, all the while feeding information back to Fleet Command. The Deimos did love routine, it seemed. They rarely altered patrol patterns. The fleet guarding the facility remained steady at 3 ships, while ships came in to resupply every 7 days. Fleet Command had designated the depot a priority target and had responded to Sandra's reports with a promise that help was on the way. For her, it could not come soon enough. Stalker woke with a start to see Link shaking him awake. "This is no time to be sleeping on the job, boss. We have worlds save and pay to earn." Stalker sat up yawning, blinking in an attempt to focus. "What's up, Link? Sunray is waiting for you on the bridge. Something is brewing." Stalker felt a jolt of energy and quickly began gathering his equipment. Sunray was communications code for the commanding officer of the 2nd Terra Nova. "Link, grab Waters. You 2 are coming with me." A few minutes later, Stalker stepped onto the bridge and headed to the main briefing room off to one side. In the room, he found his friend Assault Commander Richard Donaldson waiting. He looked up from the charts he had been studying as Stalker entered the room and waved him over. "Stalker, you look like shit. Link, Waters, good to see you both." Stalker shook his hand. "The 21st aims to please D. What can I say?" Stalker took in his friend with a glance and felt a twinge of concern at what he saw. D had seemed to have aged 10 years since he had last seen him, and there was a weariness in his eyes that seemed soul deep. Stalker drove away his concerns and instead focused on what D was saying. "I had a request from the commanding admiral. A strike force under Task Force 44 is being assembled to go to Wolf 424. With the casualties the Marines have taken in recent months, they could use some extra forces on board in case they run into heavier than expected resistance. I have selected the 21st Terra Nova, so get ready time is short." "What's the target?" "Seems the enemy has established a supply base in the system. We're going to destroy it. It's a straight smash and grab, in and out." Commodore Sandra Jansen was by no means an impatient person, but as the days had dragged on, she had begun to wonder what Fleet Command was thinking. Every hour that passed was one in which the UES Athena could be discovered and the element of surprise lost. She had almost reached the point of sending a sharply worded message pressing for urgent action when the communications officer had informed her that they had received a coded message to prepare for imminent action. Since the message had been received, the Athena had been on alert, the entire ship's company ready at a moment's notice to bring the ship to full power in combat stations. The situation at the enemy supply depot was largely unchanged, with the standard fighter sweeps and 3 guard ships in place. The only notable change was the presence of an additional destroyer-class ship, which was docked at the depot, likely to replenish its supplies. Commodore Jansen frowned as she realized her palms were sweaty, and her frown increased as she realized she had nothing to wipe them on. Resisting the urge to wipe them on her immaculately creased navy blue uniform pants, she was just about to rise from her chair and make a quick trip to the bridge's bathroom facilities when the voice of her tactical officer froze her in place. All thought of her palms forgotten. "Contact. Ships translating into the system. Count confirmed. 5 targets. Identify. No ID as yet, ma'am. Engage the spatial interface. Give me visual." Commodore Jansen slipped on her 3DSi headset and watched as a series of bright flashes rippled through space. The ship's still too far away to see. "Ma'am, IFF received. It's the battleship Mars. I am also reading the cruisers Hera, Hades, and the destroyers Vandal and Viking. Bring us to full power and move us out of the asteroid field. Navigation. Put us on an intercept course. Full ahead, if you please." As the Athena moved to join them, the Mars and escorts that formed Task Force 44 speared towards the enemy supply depot, the Deimos warships and fighters scrambling to intercept them. "Ma'am, the Mars is charging weapons. She's preparing to open fire." With a pulse of power that lit up space for kilometers around the Mars, loosed her main rail cannons. The torrent of firepower tore across the gulf of space and smashed into the nearest Deimos warship, a cruiser-sized vessel. The ship's outer skin ripped and shattered, great vents of gas and debris venting explosively into space. A moment later, a second blast from the Mars struck the already crippled ship, tearing it to pieces. As Commodore Jansen watched open-mouthed, the heaviest Deimos warship guarding the supply depot was destroyed in 2 titanic salvos from the Mars. With a blinding flash, the ship exploded, the explosion forming a miniature star as the ship disintegrated, the debris destroying dozens of Deimos fighters unfortunate enough to be close to the doomed vessel. Commodore Jansen had been in many engagements since the beginning of the war, but she had never been a spectator to such an awesome display of brute force delivered so accurately and so fast. The remaining Deimos ships that were underway, 2 destroyer-class vessels began to run, realizing that any attempt to take on the massive battleship was suicide. Another blast from the Mars glanced one of the ships, sending the much smaller vessel whirling out of control, tumbling end over end. The remaining ship ran with the Hera and Hades in close pursuit, bracketing it with fire. Between the big ships, a much smaller battle went almost unnoticed as the Deimos fighters clashed with the Marine F-55 Dark Star fighters of Task Force 44's Aviation Combat Element, AC. Closer in to the supply depot, the destroyers Vandal and Viking lanced in and with precision fire disabled the dock destroyer-sized ship's engines, before systematically eliminating any remaining defenses. Ma'am, communication from the Mars. They're offering their congratulations and are commencing landing ground forces to secure the facility. They are requesting that we hold position and provide perimeter security in case any Deimos ships arrive in the system while ground forces are deployed. Signal the Mars that their message is understood and give them warm regards for the show. Tell them that it is always good to see the god of war in action. Stalker felt his stomach lurch as the Swift Foot class transport. He was on left the destroyer UES Vandal and dropped towards the Deimos supply facility. He had listened to the naval action, though the TACnet, and had to admire the speed and efficiency of the attack. The war with the Deimos had produced profound changes on the military forces of the United Earth Federation. The casualties had been heavy and the defense haphazard, but those who had survived the fiery trial had become ruthlessly good at the art of war. The cowards and inept long dead were replaced by abler officers. In the Navy, in particular, the veteran captains and admirals had become infused with an aggressive spirit, which drove them to seek out and destroy the enemy with almost reckless abandon. For Stalker, personally, the war had become one long trial, a brutal war of attrition where men and women died by the thousands. The assault divisions had been in near constant action, interspersed with short periods of rebuilding and retraining. When he looked around the hold of the transport at soldiers of his company, the veteran 21st Terra Nova, Stalker saw a handful of familiar faces, but all too many were recent arrivals. Replacements for the dead or wounded from a dozen campaigns. None were new to combat, however. Even at the height of the war, the assault divisions had retained their policy of only accepting experienced volunteers to guarantee the highest quality of recruit and ensure they remained elite formations. Although this limited recruitment numbers and ensured that the 10 assault divisions were never at full strength, it was essential. The specialized role of the assault divisions, to be endlessly adaptable, able to fight on any terrain or in space, to be ready and able to respond to any situation or threat, and to take and hold any objective no matter the cost, demanded only the very best. It would not win the war, though. Stalker knew that as much as the 10 represented the point of the sword, the rest of the UEA made up the true armored fist of Earth. Millions of well-trained and equipped men and women in hundreds of divisions were in motion, either deployed to fall upon and destroy any renewed move against Earth, or with the various fleets taking the fight to the enemy. The 10 could take and hold any position, but it would take forces many times their size and strength to take and hold whole worlds. Total war was a matter of numbers. Each year, hundreds of millions of people on Earth reach the age of military service, providing a continual pool of manpower to call upon in a long conflict. This was perhaps the reason why the Deimos had attempted to strike and neutralize Earth relatively quickly. Only by a coup de main, a sudden surprise attack, could they hope to eliminate Earth's ability to fight a long war of attrition. That attack had failed, and a fully mobilized Earth was now beginning to roll back the Deimos advance. The only question that remained was how many would die before the Deimos realized the futility of their position and either surrendered or withdrew back beyond known space. The Swift Foot landed with a slight thud on the depot's exterior as the pilot engaged the low-gravity grapple system. The Swift Foot was fitted with a breaching module. The module, fitted underneath the Swift Foot, acted as a docking collar and formed an airtight seal with the exterior surface of the depot. As soon as the lock was confirmed, the breaching module drilled a microfilament probe into the hull. In a fraction of a second, the probe confirmed the material composite the structure was made out of, calculated the best of several possible access methods, and confirmed the presence and composition of station's atmosphere. Good SEAL specialist. We have atmosphere. Breaching now. Stalker gave a thumbs up to Swiftfoot's docking master, subconsciously checking to make sure his EEA was in low-gravity mode, just in case. There was a muffled thud as the breaching module completed using precision-directed charges to form a penetration in the hull. Then with a hiss, the access hatch in the Swiftfoot's floor opened and Stalker jumped. Stalker landed awkwardly on the twisted plate cut by the breaching module before rolling clear. The entry was fast, the assault troops pouring in through the breach. The entry was mercifully uncontested, with no enemy immediately encountered. The breach had been made in a deserted corridor, a pressure hatch visible at one end, and the size of the corridor suggested it was an access passage to a hangar. As the unit commanders took charge and swept forward, Stalker paused, resisting the urge to lead from the front. They knew what to do. Alpha 2-1 to Spartan 2-1, clean breach. All received. Alpha 2-1. Proceed with clearance at your discretion. Out. Stalker smiled at Link's tone. Link was leading the other half of the 21st Terra Nova at their second breach point. He did not enjoy the duty. The veteran scout sniper had never grown fully comfortable with his role as 2IC. As was standard practice, since the 21st Company was divided, so was the 8th Strong Company Command Unit, for with each strike force. Stalker had with him the company's surgical officer, company forward observer, and the company communications operator. The three better known by their ComNet codewords, Starlight, Spotlight, and Dazzle. While Link, Spartan, had with him Lee Waters, the venerable company intelligence officer, Iron Horse, the company electronics technician, Flashdance, and the company ordnance technician, Buccaneer. The Marines had also breached at two other locations. Their objectives were the facility's command center and power generators, while the Terra Nova had been tasked with seizing the supply storage areas before all moving on to secure the docked Deimos warship. Several minutes has passed before the first enemy were encountered as the lead unit swept into a large central storeroom and cut down the surprised Deimos warriors they found there. As Stalker stepped over the rapidly cooling bodies, the first real fighting began as other Deimos began to react to the presence of the interlopers. Stalker felt more than saw the first burst of Deimos fire, the sizzling energy bolts missing his head by mere inches. All at once, fire was coming in from several directions, and blue bursts of answering impulse fire crisscrossed with the red of the Deimos energy rifles. Stalker went down on one knee and fired a long burst at the distant shapes of the Deimos amongst the heavy cargo. Several grenades went off in quick succession, and the Deimos fire lessened as the assault troops pushed forward using available cover while maintaining fire superiority over the enemy. The Deimos, either through bravery or sheer stubbornness, refused to give any ground, and instead died where they stood in the short but brutal exchange of fire. As the firing died away, Stalker quickly surveyed the situation. The unit indicators in his command spec EA helmet's HUD told him they had taken casualties, with several unit bio indicators showing wounds, at least one critical. Stalker activated the ComNet. Starlight, set up a temporary medical post right here. I will leave you Delta and Epsilon to secure Objective 1. All other units move on to the secondary objectives. As they advanced, the resistance seemed to stiffen with each step, the fighting intense and fought at close quarters in the facility's passageways. Through his EEA helmet's acoustic enhancement system, Stalker could hear the sound of fighting coming from other places across the facility, the sound sometimes coming from above and sometimes from below. Stalker paused in the smoke-filled corridor, the walls scarred with weapons fire. All at once, the firing ahead died down, and to Stalker's surprise, the Deimos had begun to pull back, leaving their dead behind them. All units push up, keep the pressure on, don't give them any time to regroup. The leading units broke into a jogging pursuit, trusting in their armor and luck to protect them. The Deimos strategy soon became clear. All their forces were falling back on the docked warship, perhaps realizing the facility was lost and searching for a more defensible position. The fighting flared up again sharply as the Deimos tried to make a stand at the docking port, and it took a combination of heavy, accurate fire and M503 rifle-mounted grenade launchers for the leading assault troops to dislodge them. Stalker took a deep breath as he entered the Deimos warship, the first non-human vessel he had ever been on. At a glance, the interior corridors were roughly the same proportion as human ships, just a little taller to accommodate the greater height of the Deimos. That, however, was where the similarity ended. In place of the sterile, regular gray interiors of UEF warships, the corridors on the Deimos ship was covered in columns of curved rib-like bracing, making them appear almost organic, and everything was the reflective metallic of liquid mercury. Stalker touched the wall and was surprised to find that despite its metallic appearance, the surface gave slightly to the firm touch. The material looking like metal, but having a tactile feel. Stalker felt the twinge of a shiver. The ship felt utterly unhuman, and just being on it gave him an uneasy feeling, like the ship itself did not like the intrusion. All units, spread out, search and destroy protocols, and watch your fire and don't touch anything. Who knows what we will find in here? ASBR leading the way, Stalker followed the nearest unit as they carefully moved forward through the maze of corridors, everyone clearly on edge. After the rapid, noisy assault through the depot, the advance though the ship was eerily quiet. The silence only broken the gentle sounds of soldiers and equipment in motion. Unexpectedly, the corridor emerged into a large space filled with tall, thin consoles that glowed with tallow light, and the silence abruptly ended. Contact! Without warning, a torrent of red energy fire exploded from concealed positions amongst consoles, the lead assault troops all dropping to the floor, several of them hit. Stalker swore as he saw warning icons flashing up in his HUD, one indicating a fatal hit. Snarling, Stalker swept his ASBR towards the enemy, trying to locate an enemy. Repel them. Leave none alive. Stalker froze at the sound of the clearly human voice. Then he saw the clear silhouette of a human, the long Deimos energy rifle in its hands looking oddly out of place. For a moment, pandemonium reigned as the shocked assault troops held their fire, uncertain as to what to do. Stalker saw his target raise his rifle and fire a burst, whoever they were with the enemy. Stalker squeezed off a burst, the figure snapping around and crumpling to the ground. Don't stand there like a stunned rabbit. Kill them all. The strange spell was broken, and as one a wall of impulse, fire rippled out at the concealed enemy. Stalker activated the TACnet. All Marine and assault units, this is Alpha 2-1. We have engaged human forces. I repeat, human forces that are allied with the enemy. You are weapons free. Engage on sight any armed hostile. My authority. Stalker turned his attention back to the enemy. They were in good cover and in strength. The once quiet room being shredded by crisscrossing fire, several of the tall consoles toppling due to weight of fire. The training and discipline of the assault troops quickly began to tell, as well-aimed shots picked off exposed enemies, and unit commanders began to maneuver their units to outflank the enemy positions. Grenades quickly silenced the last points of stubborn resistance, and the firing died away. Cautiously, Stalker approached the body of the first enemy he had killed, the body lying in a spreading pool of blood, the liquid looking dark on the reflective surface of the floor. Up close, there was no doubt they were indeed human. The man looked in his 30s with close cropped hair and wore a ragged suit of what appeared to be modified civilian clothing incorporating basic ballistic armor. Stalker counted 25 dead, men and women of various ages, all with roughly the same appearance. Stalker nudged the dead man with his boot, and the head rolled to one side. As it did, he caught a glimpse of something and knelt down. Something small and metallic was attached to the back of the man's head. Stalker was about to have a closer look when suddenly the comm net lit up. All forces withdraw immediately. Repeat, exfiltrate now. We have detected growing energy readings. They're scuttling the ship. Get out of there. Stalker reacted instantly and began coordinating the withdrawal. The orders given, he grabbed the nearby company surgical officer. Starlight, give me a hand with this. We need this body. It could contain vital intel. Together, they dragged the body at a dead run, amongst the last to leave the alien vessel. Alpha 2-1 a fleet. How long do we have? The words had just left Stalker's mouth when he heard a growing rumble. From her bridge, Commodore Jansen watched stony-faced as the disabled Deimos ship was lit up by a bright, silent flash that vaporized a large part of the vessel. The shockwave from the blast smashed into the depot, followed by a hail of mountainous debris. Amazingly, when the light and debris cleared, the depot appeared to still be there, although not fully intact. Remaining as still as a statue in her command chair, she listened as a flurry of communications chatter filled the bridge as calls for status updates went out and reports, or more ominously silence, came back in response.